Hi, my name is Micaiah Hall, and I am a student in Health Professions LEAP 1140. This is my symposium project, and it is covering the effects of COVID-19 on families around the globe. I will be going into detail about how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted the work life, interpersonal relationships, and culture of families specifically in Spain, Korea, and America. This is an important topic because it can be applied to everyone and deserves more recognition. My thesis statement is families all around the world deserve more attention for the effects of COVID-19 on every aspect of their lives, including their culture, work life, and interpersonal relationships. Throughout this presentation, I want to emphasize on these things because each of them have changed severely since the start of the pandemic. I believe that the family is a key concept in every nation and culture, and it has not received enough attention that it deserves. Many people are familiar with the hard work and well deserved recognition healthcare workers have gotten throughout the pandemic, but those healthcare workers are also part of families and even larger families, and they put a lot of work behind the scenes that is not often recognized. Likewise, millions, if not billions, of people who are not healthcare workers are working hard to keep their families afloat and have not been seen. This is the purpose of my project. I want to show how families should be remembered and recognized for the hard work and added stress that they endured during the modern plague. And speaking of the plague, Albert Camus, the author of the book The Plague, wrote, "Many continued hoping that the epidemic would soon die out and they and their families be spared." This quote is significant to me and important to include into this project because it really symbolizes the desperation people felt during the plague. I, myself, and many others, especially those with families, have felt this same desperation during the coronavirus pandemic. The quote is easily applicable to the modern family because many people had similar fearful thoughts, such as, will I give my mother the virus if I visit her? Or what if I do get the virus and die? These are thoughts some people were not prepared to have and were abruptly thrown into some of the hardest challenges of their lives. From the start of the pandemic until today, families have been wondering when this will end. Everyone has. The desire to return to what we used to call normal has been clawing at the hearts of everyone, and especially those a part of families. And Albert Camus encompasses this feeling and frightening emotions in one single quote. COVID-19 has been a constant bombardment of unfortunate outcomes for families. It has forced the hands of millions of people to readjust to a brand new reality. This was a surprising and unexpected result of being ambushed by a new virus. Spain, for example, is a culture of family. This is reflected on its year round festivals, but also with its structural setup. Many neighborhoods in Spain lack what we would call breathing room, and this was intentional. Homes in Spain are often multi generational, with older generations relying on the help of the young for their daily activities. This familial culture had to be transformed because of the pandemic and the strict lockdown rules the government of Spain decided to put in place, which would be going in more detail later. But before the pandemic, 31% of Spain's citizens visited their parents daily, which is nearly double the amount compared to other European nations, which are usually in the 18, 16, and 12% visiting their parents every day. Um, it has been months and almost a year since families have been able to see each other. The pandemic has been a struggle for those in America also. Due to the necessary lockdown procedures, people have been scarcely seen by their family and have looked for alternatives to fill the connection. People in Spain still put in an amazing effort to help and support each other. And likewise, in America, this is happening through Zoom calls and Skype calls, so that those who are miles away can feel at home. It has been a serious, unfortunate turn of events for all families around the world. Work is an important part of a family life. It is one of the key components that keeps things functional within a family. In modern society, oftentimes both parents work, and this has become the norm in many countries. The most transformative thing COVID-19 has done for work life and families has caused many people to work from home. Millions of office workers who were used to doing things like waking up at 6:30 in the morning and making breakfast for themselves and maybe their children, getting ready for the day and going to work by 8:30, uh, had to change everything that they were doing. The pandemic transformed this routine for families because they no longer had to do that. And this was good and bad. Due to the airborne nature of the coronavirus, many companies opted to have their employees work from home. So many, in this case, is an understatement because if you were not a service industry employee or working in the food industry or healthcare industry, then you were probably working from home. So this had its benefits. For example, many people were able to have the freedom to create their own schedules for the first time. Families began to spend more time with each other and learn more about each other. Mothers and fathers who worked 10-hour shifts now only had to work for 4 or 5 hours out of the day to spend more time with their families. It was also beneficial for the environment. Because people were working from home, many people were not using their vehicles, and this improved air quality around the world. Um, the Himalayas were visible for the first time in parts of the world, and in Utah specifically, the air quality was very good for weeks at a time. Healthcare workers, especially, were recognized for the increased effort they provided throughout the pandemic as they continued to work at hospitals and healthcare facilities. However, um, working from home has led to some negative outcomes. Many people were not prepared for the emotional toll this would bring to them. Being home all of the time or most of the time also meant spending all of the time or most of the time with your spouse, which could lead to a rift in your home. Specifically, families in South Korea and around the world had a work culture that they needed to overcome. This increased tensions and disagreements due to that culture that existed there. And most of this responsibility of work fell on the male or father of the home. So when millions of fathers are told they will no longer have to come into the office and work for 13 hours, but instead complete their work days from the comfort of their own homes, they were not sure what they needed to do. This oftentimes resulted in the opposite of those positive effects of some homes experience working from home, and it caused a stressful box that no one wanted to be in. The negative effects of working from home does not only induce severe case of cabin fever, but can also cause many to lose their jobs or pay. My interviewee, for example, stated that she had to take on odd jobs, such as being a delivery driver for DoorDash, because her pay was lowered and she needed to make enough money for rent. Work life was transformed, and it transformed the entire family dynamic. It could create a more loving environment where families are able to have better interpersonal relationships. However, it can also lead to the aforementioned cabin fever in an extremely stressful environment. It is not known enough the struggles families had to endure with the abrupt change of their work lives. Families with children have been dealing with a number of different stressors since the pandemic has started. COVID-19 did not only send home the adults from work, but it also has sent home the children from school. This may sound like an extra vacation on the academic calendar, which is greatly appreciated for the students. However, it added a whole new set of worries for any parent with a child, specifically the parents of very young children. This is because these children are often in daycare or schools that are also daycares, so the parents can go to work. Without these facilities in session, families would have to find an alternative or a different job or not work at all. This could lead to a parent having to make the decision between not being able to pay rent for a month or finding a sitter and risking themselves contracting the coronavirus. Many families did end up not being able to pay their rent, moving into other families' homes or friends' houses. When school was in session, the children needed to adjust to new norms, which can be very difficult for babies, toddlers, and children. On the left is a picture of my interviewee's son going to school during the pandemic. He's barely 2 years old, but can now wear masks comfortably for hours on end. This was not easy to adjust to for a young toddler. Furthermore, those living in multi generational homes, such as those in Spain, have a dynamic that is oftentimes dependent on the youth of the family. They're very common in Spain, and they depend on the youth. And in one of the articles that I reviewed, the researcher Ayuso in 2020 stated that children play a fundamental role in the care of parents, especially when they reach a certain level of dependency. With this knowledge, we can understand why those families with a high number of younger people would struggle more. This also places a lot of pressure on the shoulder of the youth in the family. Families with children are still dealing with trials today in the twilight of the pandemic and have received little aid through it. The US government, for example, has only given much needed money to families in childcare facilities as little as 3 times throughout the entire pandemic. This experience that families of children have had through this time will be remembered for the rest of their lives and a struggle that they won't be able to forget. The culture of many places has changed or have been put on hold because of the pandemic. And this could create a great impact on families. On the left, there is an abandoned scooter. The scooter has been in the same place outside for months. because children have been encouraged to stay inside to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Utah has what many would call an outdoors culture where families spend lots of time going on hikes or visiting national parks. During the winter, they might spend a lot of time skiing or snowboarding, and either of its canyons. Activities such as this became tradition for families throughout the year, but they were forced to prevent the spread of coronavirus. They were forced to not participate in these activities. This culture shock was also seen in Spain, where the familial culture encouraged people to hug and kiss each other would not be allowed anymore. Spaniards are accustomed to embracing each other when they meet, but they did not have the opportunity to do this for a year, and it is still going on so that they can remain safe. The strict isolation rules in Spain also caused families to feel a lack of warmth in their own homes. The work culture of South Korea caused negative effects, such as a tense household. Cultures around the world have either had to be put on hold or transformed. What was normal before for people was not allowed during the pandemic. We will only find out if those things will be a prominent part of those cultures with time and in the distant or maybe near future if we could truly return back to normal. There have been some outlets for the families around the world during the COVID-19 pandemic. In America, some have found ways to come together and participate in events with protection and social distancing. The picture shows Ashley and her friends at an event while wearing masks. Before this, Ashley told me that she had not been able to go to a social event for 2 months. In Spain, many families say that going outside is the only way to cope. However, for most of the pandemic, they had to limit themselves to only 1 hour of outdoor time to prevent the spread of the virus. And this was strictly enforced with helicopters overhead during the night and police rounding the streets. Families in Korea, which can oftentimes overwork themselves, accepted government aid. All of these things have been ways that families around the world have taken upon themselves to find ways to deal with the harsh pandemic. COVID-19 has also had a detrimental impact on the mental health of families. The lockdown measures have taken a toll on everyone. Strict methods of social isolation, such as limit of time outside and the helicopter surveillance in Spain, have led to severe mental health issues. One case in Spain showed by week 4, someone's daughter, was suffering from eye tics, stomach pains, insomnia, and a nervous cough. It is important for people to be outside, but for the majority of the pandemic, places like playgrounds have been ghost towns. This is demonstrated in the picture of the left. A playground that used to be overrun by toddlers is now empty. There has also been a study to show how people have been affected by the pandemic with diagnosed mental health issues that they were experiencing. One male stated, "I've been working at home. I don't see my friends. Nobody knows I'm struggling with depression." Another male who was 30 years old stated that he was feeling anxious about the number of deaths, me or someone in my family becoming infected, the economic toll, anxiety about not being able to leave my house, stress when I do go out. The first male, who was 18, was from Australia, and the second was located in Mexico. This just shows how deeply the COVID-19 pandemic has affected those around the world and how it has no limits, that it can reach anyone and everyone and impact their mental health. So, in conclusion, families internationally have been negatively affected by the COVID 19 pandemic. This pandemic has uprooted what used to be considered normal for millions of people. The work life of many has been transformative, giving some people revelations about how their work life can change, while others have been experiencing new tensions because of it. The deep culture of many had to be readjusted, and the mental health of most was put in danger and jeopardy due to ripple effects caused by the virus. Despite all of this, many families have survived what can be considered the hardest obstacles of their lives. These families will come out stronger because of this pandemic and hopefully more hopeful for the future. Thank you for your time. I hope my presentation was informative on how the pandemic has affected families around the globe.